Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 13th of October 2024. I'm actually starting today with my military aid and geopolitics news because I need to get this out of the way. It was left over from yesterday. I didn't have time to record the video. Sorry, I'm a little bit late to it today. I had my COVID jab and my flu jab yesterday, and because I have multiple sclerosis, that messes with my whole system. And my goodness, today's a little bit difficult. It turns out that in the pharmacist, in the cupboard just below where the guy who's doing the injections was working, there I saw a bit of movement. It turns out Bill Gates was there. So I got my COVID injection, massive needle, huge needle, like really thick. And it turns out I've got a bloody microchip there now. Every time I twitch my right nipple, I can access Microsoft Publisher in my head. Yeah, I can make a 3-page leaflet. There you go. That is Sunday morning conspiracy theory gag for you, the team. Anyway, let's get to military aid. Stop this nonsense, Pierce. Ukraine will receive an additional loan of 400 million Canadian dollars, approximately 300 million US dollars from Canada. The agreement was signed yesterday by the Ministry of Finance and will support priority budget expenditures, actually 2 days ago, through the IMF's administrative account. So there seem to be a number of big loans going to Ukraine. I don't know if this is anything to do with the G7 loan underwritten by... I don't think it is. This is preferable. I think is it 1.5% or something like that. I think this is a genuine just loan from the Canadians to the Ukrainians to try and keep things moving in Ukrainian society. We have the EU proposing voluntary contributions in order to bypass Hungary's veto on Ukraine aid. I don't know where the EU is with regard to Hungary and the aid going to Ukraine. There are different things happening, such as the loan facility underwritten by the frozen Russian assets, but also these other aid, like actual military aid, being consistently blocked by Hungary. And I think those are two separate things. So $6.6 billion in military assistance for Ukraine has been blocked by Budapest since May 2023. That is a year and a half's worth of Hungary being Viktor Orban being an absolute noodle. And that's such an understatement. I would like to swear about the giant toad in chief. So anyway, there you go. Hungary will sign a new contract with Gazprom that will provide the country with long-term gas supplies at a competitive price. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said at a gas forum in St. Petersburg in 2025, the agreement will allow Budapest to receive 8.5 billion cubic meters of gas via the Turkish stream, Szijjártó said, according to the Moscow Times. So the Russians are keen to keep the gas flowing to Hungary. Hungary is keen to get that gas from Russia. Ukraine is keen not to allow that to flow through Ukraine. Will it mean that the Hungarians will have to pay more for that? Well, they're claiming it will be a competitive price. I don't know, but Ukraine is not having any part of that. German aid to Ukraine says during today's press conference with the Ukrainian President Zelensky and the German Chancellor Scholz, a number of announcements were made. Of course, we know that Zelensky was all over Europe for a number of days in the last week. There is a lot of talk about what took place here and people saying that Germany is providing Ukraine with a whole bunch of new stuff. Actually, most of it had been previously announced anyway. So German aid to Ukraine gives some clarity, 170 million euros for the Ukraine energy infrastructure. These funds are divided into 100 million, 70 million, I think both of which were previously announced, which were announced by the Federal Foreign Office and the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in the middle and end of September, respectively. Exactly. So there was that. Deliveries of military aid worth over 600 million euros. According to Chancellor Scholz, a new comprehensive aid package worth over 600 million euros has just been delivered to Ukraine. The package is said to include the 5th IRIS-T SLM fire unit, the delivery of which was made public 2 days ago, as well as IFVs, MBTs, so infantry fighting vehicles, main battle tanks, self-propelled howitzers, artillery ammunition, and drones. At least in the case of the IFVs, the last 20 Marder 1A3s, which Rheinmetall had promised to deliver by the end of September, are now likely to have been officially delivered. The self-propelled howitzers could be part of the 6 Panzerhaubitze 2000s, which were to be delivered or are to be delivered by the end of the year, but Sudzana 2 are also possible. I'll be able to provide all the details of that very likely next week, but this is just the regular flow of military aid from Germany to Ukraine. New military aid package worth 1.4 billion euros in cooperation with Belgium, Denmark and Norway, delivery until the end of the year. The package, Skakeworks package itself, was already announced by Der Spiegel in mid-September, and in principle, it's not a package, but simply a summary of what Germany wants to deliver by the end of the year. And he's reported on this previously. According to Scholz, this includes further IRIS-T and Skynex air defense. So Skynex are those kind of palletized, big cannons, auto cannons that fire huge amounts of lead into the air, a la Gepard, but advanced a huge amount. Anyway, so it includes further IRIS-T, Skynex air defense systems, Gepard, self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, self-propelled howitzers, main battle tanks, armoured vehicles, combat drones, radars, and artillery ammunition. Short explanation is everything except the Skynex air defense system was known. As of today, 2 additional Skynex air defense systems are pledged. These were announced in February 2024, if I recall correctly. However, the delivery was originally scheduled for 2025. Good news then, that the delivery of at least one system will be carried out this year. With regard to the other equipment announced in this package, the German government announced everything mentioned there in more detail already in mid-August. I've written a detailed article on this that I would like to recommend to you, so go and check out his website. So yeah, plenty of talk, but besides that, one Skynex system will be delivered a couple of months earlier than the last pledged Marder 1A3s have now been delivered. There were no new announcements, no new aid. So just a bit of clarity there from perhaps a miscommunication. I guess Scholz will be bigging up what Germany are doing, but actually they're already doing that. It's not to denigrate the German efforts. They are doing absolutely loads for Ukraine. It's just being sold possibly at that press conference as new aid. Right, Denmark is to set up funds to finance arms production in Ukraine. This is fascinating because if you remember, every time I talk about the 3 ways of the hierarchy of 3 ways of giving aid to Ukraine, I always use Denmark because Denmark don't have much of a defense industry that can help any more than it already has in Denmark. So I say, if you're Denmark, not if you're Ukraine. If you're Ukraine, best thing people can do are invest in Ukraine. Depends what your metrics of success are, or what your objectives are. So if you need like anti-ballistic missile air defense systems, then you're gonna have to either get a SAMP-T or a Patriot. So you can only go to 2 places to do that, right? But in general abstract terms, if you are, say, Denmark, the best thing you can do to help Ukraine is to invest in your own defense industry to produce stuff for Ukraine and give it to Ukraine, because you are stimulating your own economy. That money is essentially staying in Denmark, and then you're giving the products to Ukraine at whatever value that is. The second best thing Denmark can do from the Danish point of view in order to achieve strategic objectives with regard to helping Ukraine and stabilizing the region is to invest in Ukrainian industry to build stuff, because then that money stays in Ukraine and it becomes not only a help for them militarily, but it becomes a help for Ukraine economically. And the third best thing Denmark can do is to buy stuff from, say, America, France, whatever. So sending money outside of their own country and not give it to Ukraine, but give it to a third country, but at least Ukraine still gets that military product. Okay. And I always use Denmark as an example because their military industry isn't as wide-ranging. So Denmark setting up funds to finance arms production in Ukraine is that second best thing that they're doing, because they've exhausted all of their options inside Denmark. So they recognize that the next best thing they can do is spend money in Ukraine. And it could be an investment as well. So it could be like, okay, we're going to give you this money, but actually these will be Danish entities operating in Ukraine, or we would like some of the technology or some of the know-how back in order to inform our own defense industries or something like that. I'm sure there'll be some kind of strings attached because there's no such thing as a free lunch. So, okay, this isn't a free lunch because actually that investment is an investment in global stability and is an investment for Denmark in terms of their geopolitical objectives and strategy. So it's not like here's money for free just because we feel sorry for you. This is actually we're investing in you to help us strategically. But it might also be a national security investment in terms of information coming back and an economic investment, depending on whether there are Danish entities that will be involved in that investment in Ukraine. Norway's Ministry of Defence has established a military attache position in Kyiv. The new official will oversee collaboration between Norwegian and Ukrainian researchers and industries in defence innovations and industrial development. So, it's like a plan, this. It's exactly what I'm talking about. So what Denmark have just been announcing is they're investing a load in Ukraine is probably going to look something like what's going on here, which is Norway's MOD saying we have a military attache position open to make sure that that flow of investment is going to the right places in Ukraine and that flow of knowledge and research is coming back to Norway so that we can understand the implication of these defence innovations, and we are developing industrial capabilities both in Ukraine but also back in Norway. This is a two-way street, and that's exactly what I'm talking about there. So I hope, because I say this so often, it becomes clear that, as I keep saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch. This is a positive sum game for both entities. Slovakia, again, here we go. Slovakia wants to expand. So you've got the government, you've got Robert Fico saying, hey, politically, we're not going to help out Ukraine. Like I keep saying, he's like, we're not going to do that from a moral point of view, moral political point of view. So he says, us giving weaponry to Ukraine is a bad thing to do. It's morally bad, so that's why we're not going to do it. Right, that's his argument. Essentially, that's what it boils down to. But then he says, but we're happy to sell you stuff. That's cool. In other words, morality plays second fiddle to making money. And it's incredible. It's just, it's so obvious. It's like, well, really, we're only saying that top stuff because we're compromised by Russia. But actually, we're okay with it, and we're going to sell you whatever you want. And more than that, we're now going to start investing in Ukraine. So it's like, it's morally bad that we help you, but we are going to invest in you succeeding. Total double standards. And of course, it's because I guess really they don't believe their words that they rhetorically give in terms of supporting Russia. Or Robert Fico has these ideas up here that are ideologically pro-Russian. But the people down below who are operating industry are like, you can say what you like, Fico, mate, but we're investing in Ukraine because actually there's a positive sum game here. Not only does Ukraine need our assistance, but we can make some money and get some information and knowledge back from this. So, Slovakia wants to expand the repair facility for Ukrainian military equipment in Michalovce, according to Foreign Minister Juraj Blaner, in a meeting with German Minister Annalena Baerbock. Germany is financing the repairs and Slovakia is providing the premises. So, actually, this is Germany financing those repairs in Slovakia, but the expansion will be providing jobs for Slovakians. So actually, this isn't investing in Ukraine. This is investing in Slovakia in order to help Ukraine, in order to repair Ukrainian military equipment. Just they honestly talk out both sides of their mouths, these Slovakians, or at least the leadership there. Right, Zelensky sums up his European tour that he's just done in terms of more help for Ukraine. So, quote, defence packages for protection, air defence, investments in the production of drones and other weapons in Ukraine, that's what we've just been talking about, are all the results of visits to London, Paris, Rome and Berlin, the president said. And also, actually, before that, Croatia, with North Macedonia, Serbia, Greece, and obviously Croatia on board with that. So he went all over the shop and met with all sorts of people, including NATO as well. Now, the Ukrainian defense company has developed a Barrage munition called Stick M12, according to Military The new drone can fly up to 70 kilometers, and at the same time, Stick M12 drone can stay in the air for more than an hour. This looks like a bit of an answer to the Orlan 10. As you can see, there's quite a few of those in that little room. So this will be good news for the Ukrainians, who I think still are at a disadvantage compared to the Russians, who operate a fair number of fairly cheap, decent medium-range reconnaissance drones. So they're going up to sort of 90 kilometers behind Ukrainian lines and spotting for targets with their Supercams, their Zalas, and their Orlan 10s and 30s. And the Ukrainians do have the Shark drone and a few others, but they need to really catch up with the Russians there and use these far more extensively. So there's a 70-kilometer ranged drone. Hopefully will be of use to the Ukrainians. Ukraine has become a hotbed. This is kind of in line with everything we've been talking about. It's become a hotbed of defense innovation as it rapidly develops new battlefield technology, says the Kyiv Independent. They spoke with 2 investors in Kyiv about the state of Ukraine's defense startups and what technologies most excite them today. And so this is really good news that there is this investment coming in, inward investment, no doubt from abroad. Ukraine has a capacity to produce around $20 billion worth of weapons and equipment, according to government estimates, but the state budget can only fund around $6 billion. That's gone up from what I last said, which was there was a $10 billion shortfall. They've probably increased that capacity without getting the necessary increase in investment. So there's a $14 billion shortfall of investment for the Ukrainians in order that they can build exactly what they have the potential to build. That's incredible. Government has launched several initiatives to encourage foreign investment, including the Brave One Accelerator Program, which was launched in April 23. Brings together defense startups, investors, and government stakeholders to encourage innovation and investments. Okay, so 2 investors in Kiev have been contacted, and here they give their opinions. One, Michael Hewitt, says Ukraine has gone from having a traditional defense industry to now shifting its attention to the innovation of asymmetric warfare, drone warfare, air, sea, and even sub-sea. And what we're looking to do now is lift to the next phase of venture capital. Growth, scalability, and following exactly what Zelensky said he wanted to do, which was build capacity in the defense industry. Everything from artillery shell factories to building up the capacity to defend the country and be part of the European defense industry. Second thing he wants is to protect and scale his own defense industrial base. We also need to protect and scale up assets of key companies of Ukraine that have been part of the defense industry before. And then finally, the area that we're most focused on is a pure innovative tech side. And here we've got the Migura M5 and a bunch of other drones that are at the cutting edge of what Ukraine is doing. And then another investor says, this is Andre Pinar, says, I think Ukraine is a leader today in the use of unmanned vehicles of all kinds, whether it's in land, sea or air, and also the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning for national defense. And that's something we hear less about, but we know is sort of bumbling along in the background. Anyway, those are 2 very exciting areas. And then another area is not being talked about a great deal, but which is just as important, is cybersecurity. And that's interesting because only this week we heard that the military websites in Russia were taken down, destroyed, and 150 terabytes of information was disappeared, like gone. And that has happened. That's not the first time. That is happening an awful lot. So he says the cybersecurity market in Ukraine, although it's still quite small, about $100 million, we think it has terrific potential to grow. Ukraine has been a base of great technology professionals and technology know-how for a very long time. Many American, British and European companies have been relying on Ukrainian technology professionals and Ukrainian engineers for their R&D. And the same world-class excellence in engineering and know-how is now being applied to cybersecurity. And so we see not only Ukrainian cybersecurity services companies growing, but also new cybersecurity products being created in Ukraine. This ability to work very closely with Ukrainian cybersecurity companies is very advantageous, not only for Ukraine, but also for and this is the kind of positive sum game, right, that I keep talking about, but also for the US, because the things that Russia is trying to do to Ukraine with cybersecurity are at some point going to make their way in the form of ransomware or a cyber attack on America. So interesting. Pinar then follows on and says, this year about $9 billion has been invested in US defense tech startups and about $2 billion across all of Europe. So in that context, 12 million. So this is a few weeks ago, Brave One announced Ukraine's defense tech industry had attracted $12 million in private investment since the beginning of the war. This number has grown compared to last year, but still very low compared to other countries. What is stopping investors? So he says, so in that context, 12 million is a very modest amount of money. We are going to be working very hard to bring more VC, venture capital investment firms from other allied countries to Ukraine to really build an allied VC community around Ukraine to scale this capital. I think there are two things we can do in Ukraine to scale this capital. One is to do much more mentoring among founders as possible about lessons learned, mistakes made, and how to work with outside capital and venture capital. I think many Ukrainian founders are still learning about venture capital, how it works, and how to open up their businesses for outside investment. And the second thing I think is really important is that the government does as much as it can to lift restrictions on the export of Ukrainian intellectual property and know-how so that Ukrainian founders can build companies that can really go global and become unicorns. If you look at the US market, yes, the US is a big country, it has access to a lot of capital, but the most successful American VC-backed companies have all become global companies, and they've become global companies because they've not been subject to export restrictions. So easing those export restrictions is really important. So on and so forth. So lots more to learn from that article. Really interesting stuff there. Right, now we are going to go to the US. And bad news coming from our best friend Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives. Quote, and as, just to say, Phillips O'Brien says Republicans are preparing to cut all aid to Ukraine. Quote, I don't have an appetite for further Ukraine funding, and I hope it's not necessary, said US Speaker Mike Johnson, adding that former President Trump could swiftly end the Russia-Ukrainian war if he was re-elected. And this is all bad news. And again, if you're supporters of Ukraine, really, like, are you still thinking these are the guys that are going to be the best support for Ukraine? They're telling you, literally telling you, we are going to cut support for Ukraine. There you go. Mike Johnson suggested that the resolution of the Ukraine-Russia war could hinge on the 2024 US presidential election. Johnson suggested that Trump could swiftly end the Ukraine-Russia war if re-elected, contrasting this with the view that under a Harris administration the war would likely continue. I don't have an appetite for further Ukraine funding. I hope it's not necessary. If Kamala Harris is president, I don't think it ends, and that's a desperate and dangerous scenario. And that's from Punchbowl News, I think. So Jane Kyiv reports on this, saying it's official. As repayment to Putin, the GOP will allow Russia to massacre an unarmed Ukraine. Quote, I have no desire to continue funding Ukraine. Quote, if President Trump wins, I believe he'll be able to end this war. Speaker of the US House of Representatives Johnson. And then minutes after Mike Johnson throws Ukraine under the bus, this is important, Dmitry Medvedev comments on it. So the former Prime Minister of Ukraine, saying that they will still destroy Ukraine no matter what deal Trump makes with Putin. Ouch, this kind of undercuts Putin, undercuts Trump's claims and Mike Johnson's claims, really. If President Trump wins, I believe that he can actually bring that conflict to a close. I really do. I think he'll call Putin and tell him that this is enough, said US House Speaker Mike Johnson. So that's Dmitry Medvedev quoting Mike Johnson. And then Medvedev continues, and what if Putin says, not yet, Ukraine must capitulate and no joining NATO? So there you go. It's like, yeah, but what if we do this? Then what? Max24 quoting from the original Punchbowl News article, The World According to Mike Johnson, so you can go and check it out there. It's, not looking good, therefore, continued support to Ukraine if the Republicans get in November. Okay, Samuel Bender now gives another thread, and we're going to look at drones again. So, quick take. The Russian military is systematizing the experience of using drones in combat. Defense Minister Belousov recently visited Rubicon, MOD's first Centre for Advanced Unmanned Technologies, formed in August 2024. In one of the functioning drone combat units, Belousov was given a report on the work of the centre's detachments in combat, the latest drones and unmanned ground vehicles, UAVs, aerial drones and ground drones, along with the work of operators and the analytical department that summarise information and the use of unmanned forces and assets. Belousov had a meeting with the development of unmanned technologies and the further development of the Rubicon Centre. Instructions were given to form and staff 5 more drone detachments. Their experience will form the basis of a new program for training tactical drone specialists. So we are starting to see this move. This has been kind of done in Ukraine. There's more formality to what is being done by the government to support drone manufacture and drone training. And here we have Belousov finally sort of getting together and making sure that there is this similar sort of activity in Russia. Belousov called for the creation of UAV pilot operator profession in official MOD military education. Quote, military specialities must appear. The use of unmanned aircraft must be taught in military schools. End quote. This Rubicon Center was created on Belousov's orders to, quote, finally systematize lesson from the past 2.5 years of war. Some Russian volunteers noted that, quote, the training of drone operators and UAV development should be handled by the state, not by groups of enthusiasts. Of course, that they both are useful, but the state really needs to take a strategic role in coordinating everything much more effectively in Russia than it already has been, if Russia is to prevail in any way. This is what, as I say, Ukraine has been doing, and there's an asymmetry there. Belousov is trying to equalize that asymmetry. Russian Telegram channels noted that the Zala Z-20 ISR, intelligence surveillance reconnaissance drone's new color scheme shown in the Belousov visit video as a defense against Ukrainian FPVs. So the FPVs coming from above, that's going to be much more camouflage with the ground below. But we've also seen it doesn't really make that much difference. Belousov was shown drone and counter-drone technologies at the center. So here he is sort of walking around looking at a bunch of stuff. You never quite know with the Russians how much of this stuff is getting produced at large scale and whether they just get out a load of impressive looking things and put them on tables. And you think, oh, wow, good stuff. But I don't know how widespread it is. But it's certainly got this work taking place to some degree. More drones shown to Belousov that are used by Rubicon drone detachments, including the usual suspects, FPVs, DJI Mavics, so Chinese drones, basically Lancets, Zalas, and Supercam drones. So I guess, some of this isn't particularly new to most people seeing Russian drone hardware. There have been multiple calls from different Russian volunteer groups and individuals for official military education on the use of drones in combat, since numerous complaints made against many Russian officers, including the lack of understanding of how and where drones fit in today's Russian military formations. Much of the drone pilot training was initially undertaken by volunteers, and they also designed many tactics and concepts in use by the military today. The result was a lack of coordination in crafting such instructions, resulting in uneven training quality and drone use across the front in numerous units. Belousov's Rubicon Center is an attempt to better organize this vast knowledge into a more coherent approach to using and fielding drones and related tech in combat. According to Russian commentary, the Rubicon Center also, quote, develops and tests advanced robotic systems, conducts research and implements advanced robotic systems in the military, and trains robotic operators, end quote. Or actually, to continue, the center's specialists also interact with representatives of the national defense industry, People's VPK, test and apply its developments, and also conduct research on the study of artificial intelligence and methods of its application in robotic systems. Belousov's Rubicon sounds a lot like Dmitry Rogozin's Bars Sarmat volunteer detachment, currently in a process of formation. Similar mission to incorporate and develop aerial, ground, drone and related tech cooperation with the People's VPK and work with AI, etc. Rogozin's formation was initially blessed by the MOD a few months ago, so the MOD can potentially expand that activity or fold it back into official military structures, possibly in to the Rubicon Center itself. Regardless, it's likely that Belousov will continue to expand the Rubicon Center activity and area of responsibility as an official epicenter of development that at first originated among volunteers and now is becoming more centered in the MOD. To the point number 4 above about education, Russian military does have an official drone profession and training curricula, but it was limited to few operators and mostly ISR drones pre-2022. Belousov is now calling for all military academic institutions to teach all cadets and officers about drones, technology, concepts, tactics at the tactical level where Russian units are encountering Ukrainian drones every day. Belousov wants to go and form a few drone operators pre-2022, to many, with most officers knowing about drone use and tactics. Russian state media reports that the Rubicon Center teams are operating in the Donetsk, Belgorod, and Kursk regions, and that one of the center's key tasks is to train drone operators. Okay, end of thread. Interesting. It is amazing that's almost coming up for 3 years, so it's over 2.5 years into this war, that this is now starting to come to fruition. I would have thought drones, it was obvious that drones were going to be huge a year into the war, a year and a half into the war, and Russia should have been on it then. As every country looking at this war will and should be on it. If they aren't on it, you've missed a trick. I'm sure the US and the UK and the French and German militaries are looking at this and going, right, we need to embed drones firmly in our military strategy and in our military sort of units, formations. Absolutely vital. Right, it's totally worrying here. So this is a Washington Post article. Several thousand North Korean soldiers are reportedly being trained in Russia and could be deployed to the front lines in Ukraine by the end of the year. These units may replace Russian forces in border regions, allowing them to join combat operations. This is incredibly worrying. We are seeing an expansion of the war. What is the world doing with a bilateral agreement, military agreement between Russia and North Korea, with North Koreans now dying on or near the front lines, training Russians on missiles, being trained themselves by the Russians? You've got uniformed North Korean soldiers preparing, it appears, to fight in Ukraine for Russia. What does that say about, the kind of escalation of allied troops doing that? Like the whole worry about, we can't do this, that'll be an escalation. We can't do that, that'll be an escalation. Meanwhile, Russia going off and doing it. They've got missiles from Iran and from North Korea, and they are firing them deep into Ukraine. But Ukraine is not allowed to use these missiles from allied nations and fire them deep into Russia. Total asymmetry. Russia are taking the piss. And at the same time, Russia are using the troops we've had Iranians at the beginning of the war, I think, perish in strikes on at the time Shahed launch sites. We've got North Koreans dying recently as they were working with the Russians at some place or another. And now we have news of maybe just regular North Korean soldiers being trained up. What are we doing? That's escalation, but the West, oh no, can't. Just blows my mind. Anyway, that's probably enough. I'll leave the geopolitics video for later. I'll get on with my usual hits and losses. But that's that one out of the way. That's quite a lot of information. Let me know what you guys think of all of that. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.